Thank you. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, working so hard behind the scenes in order to make this run as smoothly as possible. With everyone being let in, I'll go ahead and start. Welcome, everyone, to the North Carolina Council on Developmental Disabilities Self-Advocate Discussion Series. I am Chris Hendricks, your Policy Education Coordinator for the North Carolina Council, and on behalf of the Council, as always, thank you so much for being here. This discussion series is a place for North Carolina self-advocates to gather and engage with each other to talk about things that affect our lives as people experiencing life with IDD and other disabilities. And we want this time together to be used to get to know each other and to get to know the council, where I and other individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities are leaders, colleagues, and we're valued for our input because we are who we are. People with disabilities should always be valued like that, and this discussion series will demonstrate why and how. This month, we are talking about the Jean Wolff-Rossi for Participant Involvement Fund. A little bit of a mouthful, but what is it? How does the council use it to empower persons with disabilities? And is it worth the process effort? We'll answer all these questions and more today. Also, since it's election season, we'll be taking some time to discuss disability voting rights towards the second half of our time together. And we've got a lot to cover, so I'm going to jump into my colleague Philip Woodward's favorite part of our discussions, what we have come to call the jokes of the day. Everybody ready? Put your happy laughter hats on. What did the fried rice say to the shrimp?
This is Philip. My guess is we're both tiny.
Philip, that's a good guess, but not quite. The answer is, don't walk away from me. Don't walk away from me. All right, next joke. My pastor really advocates for Amazon. Wanted to have some advocacy jokes, considering it's voting season. My pastor really advocates for Amazon. I guess you might call him a prime minister. I'm sorry, we can't help ourselves. Now that we are all relaxed, who is Jean Marie Wolff-Rossi? Well, Jeannie was born July 15th, 1966 in Lewisburg, North Carolina. From that moment on, she was a powerful self-advocate for North Carolinians with disabilities and across the nation. As a student at NC State, she formed the Student Organization for Disability Awareness, and she served as its president and was a fierce campus advocate for the Americans with Disabilities Act. She first worked with the North Carolina Council on Developmental Disabilities in 1994 during a 6-month internship her senior year. After earning a bachelor's degree in social work, Jeannie represented North Carolina in a symposium for young disability leadership in Washington, D.C. in 2001. She was appointed to the North Carolina Council on Developmental Disabilities, where she was elected vice chair and served on the Systems Change and Finance committees. She was instrumental in helping to develop initiatives, including the NCCDD's Participant Involvement Fund, which she later managed. For a short time, Jeannie was a staff advisor to the Association of Self-Advocates of North Carolina and was appointed to the North Carolina Statewide Independent Living Council. When she passed away in 2009, the council voted unanimously in favor to rename the Participant Involvement Fund the Jean Wolff-Rossi Fund for Participant Involvement, also known as the Rossi Fund and the Participant Fund. So, what exactly is the Rossi Fund? Through an application and reimbursement process, the Rossi Fund or Participant Fund gives money to people with intellectual and other developmental disabilities and their family members to help them with travel costs to conferences and seminars and much, much more that is designed to improve their knowledge, networking, and skill levels for advocacy. Through the Participant Fund, individuals with IDD and their family members can receive reimbursement for specific expenses. You must apply and be approved for these funds, and applicants receiving Rossi funds will be asked to complete a Rossi Fund participant survey, and they're expected to share their knowledge with the local community and with the North Carolina Council members and their network, like with attendees here today. We're going to take the time to go over eligibility, how you get reimbursement, the applications, and ultimately the decision-making process for monetary awards. We'll start with eligibility. So to qualify for the Rossi Fund, you must be one of the following: people with an intellectual disability or developmental disability, parents, family members, or individual guardians of persons with an intellectual developmental disability. You may also be a parent of a child at risk for IDD, and applicants must be residents of North Carolina. Reimbursement. The Rossi Fund can only partially fund the cost of attending an event and are available to reimburse individuals. That means that you pay expenses up front, and then the Rossi Fund pays you back. And here's everyone's favorite part. What expenses do the Rossi Fund actually cover? You can be reimbursed for conference or seminar registration, hotel or lodging, personal assistance services, transportation, childcare or respite, or other expenses that are at the discretion of the North Carolina Council. Individuals may apply for funds to cover up to 3 of these expenses on their application. And now the applications themselves. An application must be received by NCCDD 15 days prior to the first day of an in-state event and 30 days prior to the first date of an out-of-state event. Applications are funded on a first-come, first-served basis. The NCCDD reviews applications frequently, and the decisions on all applications will be provided in writing to all applicants. As for the notice of award, the awards are limited to $600 per year per person per household for in-state events, but up to $800 per year per person per household for out-of-state events. An asterisk here: an individual may only receive one Rossi Fund award in a 12-month period. The maximum amount available for any single activity or event cannot exceed $2,400 in-state and $2,400 out of state. This is only a snapshot of details regarding the Rossi Fund for participant involvement, so please closely review all the materials related to the Rossi Fund before you submit an application. And we'll go over this during the resource section later on in today's presentation, but we've provided links to the application and some more in-depth information on the Rossi Fund as well. So now that we know a little bit more about NCCDD's Rossi Fund and how to apply, we're going to hear from folks who have used the Rossi Fund. Next up, we have 2 people with...
We're done, because obviously I don't know how to shut this thing off.
I'm sorry, did someone have a share? Oh, I may have misunderstood. We have 2 individuals who have used the Rossi Fund, and we want to learn about their experience. It takes a lot to fill out the form and apply, and we want to learn about how they felt applying for the form, what it was like, what their experience was using it, and how they might share what they learned with self-advocates around the state. So with that, I will start with Victoria. And Victoria, if you're with us, please forgive me because I've met with you, I've spoke with you several times. Is your last, if I mispronounce your last name, please forgive me. Is it Neji?
Meiji.
Neji, Victoria Neji. Welcome, Victoria. Thanks for being here with us today.
Thank you, Chris. I'm glad to be here.
Absolutely. Well, I won't keep any of us waiting anymore. What was the event or need that you wanted filled by the Rossi Fund? What can you tell us about it?
Okay, thank you. And so I first applied for the Rossi Fund last year, at the end of last year, when I was looking to participate in the I2I conference for the first time. I had heard about I2I from several people, and they recommended it as a place to really learn more about what's happening with disability services and to kind of hear from the provider perspective. So that's a conference that includes a lot of providers as well as officials from the Department of Health and Human Services. And they also have like a consumer caucus night where it's meant for people who have lived experience actually consuming services, quote unquote, consuming services, or being family members to those who are beneficiaries of service. And so this was for the December I2I conference that would have taken place in Pinehurst. But I don't know if you all remember the news around that time. There was a unfortunate event that caused like a power outage for that county. I think it was Moore County. And so although I was applied for funding for that conference, I couldn't actually attend the conference like everyone else. And so thankfully, the original application that I had submitted for the Rossi Fund, I was able to request for it to be reconsidered for the upcoming I2I conference, which I was then able to attend in June of this year in Raleigh. And so my process of applying, after I heard about it from someone else, then I went on the website, the North Carolina Council of Developmental Disabilities website, and from there I searched for the initiatives, and then there was the conference funding opportunity, and it's like a web form, but they also have a version that's like downloadable. And so I first started off reviewing the questions like in on Google Docs. So that's kind of what I use, or you can use Word doc. And I just got an overview of all the information that I would need to gather. And then I worked on it over maybe a couple of weeks of gathering the information and kind of thinking through what my response would be. And then once I finished working on it in the Google Doc, then I went to the website and submitted it electronically. And then I waited to hear back. I think this was maybe about 4 weeks potentially of the review process. And then when I heard back about the award, then I could make plans for the journey.
So I have attended the I2I conference before, but I'm a little biased and I'm also staff. So what I have to say doesn't count. It's more important that we hear from you. Did you find when you were finally able to attend the conference that it did indeed improve your knowledge or skills to better advocate for yourself or others?
Yes, I think it was helpful because for most of the pandemic, like probably like about 3+ years, we had done most things remotely. And during that time, I had sat in a lot of webinars by different like agencies about services. So it was helpful, like for the first time, to kind of be in the same room as the people who were kind of developing policies or practices for the services, and to be able to ask questions directly, and also just to get a greater awareness of like the wide range of people or stakeholders that are involved in this industry. So it was definitely helpful, like to see it from like an industry perspective of all the people behind the system and the services that we use for support. And so I think it was definitely informative, and it'll also help me to connect with other advocates as well. So we kind of had an impromptu dinner on one of the evenings at the conference hotel, and it was just great to kind of build my connection in that way to other people who had been in this industry for more years and were able to kind of share stories or lessons that they had learned from previous conferences or just from previous experiences being involved for so many years. Because my journey into this world is through being a sibling. So I think for me, for much of my life, like as a child, I would kind of support my mom in caring for my sibling. But then as I became an adult, I started to realize that advocacy is so really key in terms of actually meeting the goals that my family has. And so this was helpful for me to kind of build up my own understanding and my own network of other people who I can learn from as we're working to advocate for improved conditions. So yeah, it was helpful.
Thanks for that, Victoria. You actually, your impromptu dinner kind of answers my next question. It's clearly expanded your advocacy network. And have you been able to, or have you stayed in touch with some of the these advocates and leaders post-conference?
Yes, yeah, I think everyone that I met, all the other advocates, they were very supportive. And so me sharing about my experience as a sibling, many of them were parents or had kind of worked in the industry as well as their lived experience. And so many people were very supportive of me and continue to be. And so, for example, through this conference, a meeting that I had there, actually, I was able to work with them on a collaboration from that meeting that I wasn't expecting when I first my first day of the conference. So I think it was definitely fruitful, and I just got to meet so many people who have interesting stories and were able to kind of share their experience with me to help me to feel more confident being in this space. Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. And you mentioned other advocates. I'm just curious, were you also able to connect with other self-advocates as well?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely other self-advocates. Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
And yeah, so yeah, it was great. And I think I saw you at the conference as well.
You did. So,
Yes.
so like, I'm so glad you remembered. And yet I was,
Mhm.
I was
Yeah.
hoping to keep it a surprise, but it's okay. So given your experience and what it's led to, it sounds like it's led to something even bigger than was expected. So I think I know the answer to this, but would you, given your experience, even though you had to wait and go to the second Eye2Eye conference, would you recommend the use of the Rossi Fund, and how would you recommend it to others moving forward?
Okay. Yes, I definitely recommend I think it's a great for people to get more exposure to like the decision makers or people who influence like services and not just services, but just in this particular conference, that was the focus of this conference. But I do think like for me, having the support and like the reason behind this support from the fund of like for people to be better informed and also to be like better connected in like influencing decisions that are made that affect us. I do think like I definitely highly recommend this to other people who are living with disabilities or caring for someone who lives with disabilities, because I think it reminds you of how important your voice is in decisions that are made, so that I think for me, that's what it did for me. It reminded me that I it is one is like I have the privilege that I can speak up, and so that's one thing that I remembered because I was actually there with my siblings, so they were able to come with me. And I think whenever we have opportunities like that to be able to share our story, I think it makes a difference. And I think the more of us can do that more times and more often, I think that should help to hopefully shift the needle on certain things that maybe we previously thought we couldn't influence. So I think for me, that's the point of going to these meetings, is to hopefully move the needle on things that really matter to us. And so I think having the support of this fund is helpful. And the reason behind it, I think that's also empowering as well, to know that I'm going here for myself to be empowered, but hopefully what I learned from this, I can share with others to also be empowered in their journey too.
You said so many powerful things there, but I heard a phrase that that I want to highlight for everyone, and that is moving the needle forward. It's one thing to talk about advocacy. It's another thing to go somewhere and take place in advocacy and notice that notice advocacy in action. And it's really, really cool that the funds open the doorway for that to you. And we're certainly grateful for your advocacy. And this would be one example of the Self-Advocate discussion series where you're getting to share about your experience with the Rossi Fund. But could you come up with any other arenas or areas in the community for how the Rossi Fund could be shared for some of our other self-advocates who might want to tell their family and friends?
Okay, so are you asking me like how to, like, other venues or places that more people can find out about the Rossi Fund?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, actually, as I was preparing for this, I was thinking as part of what we're doing. So I started a community called Akalaka, and it's a community for care partners. So for people to feel less lost navigating what I call the wilderness of disability services, and also to feel like less alone on the journey, the lifelong journey that we have with disability and care. And one of along with helping people better navigate like the Medicaid waiver, which is called the Innovation Waiver in North Carolina. We also kind of help people connect to ways to help better manage the costs of living with disability. So whether that's through like local like city services or county services. And I think being aware of this fund and it as a resource to people is definitely something that I want to better integrate in what we do for people in our community who want to be more involved, like in conferences or in meetings. And so I think that's we'd be one venue to help more people be connected and also to assist people with the application form, because I know that I applied for this for myself, but I know, for example, my sibling, if they wanted to apply for this funding, they would need my assistance with this. And so I'm kind of thinking of ways that we can better assist other people who might need assistance with actually submitting the application, because that could be a big hindrance for someone, even like once someone knows, like, do they have the support that they need to be able to apply? I think that's one significant piece. And it's what kind of, it's also a barrier for like people accessing services, like, for example, enrolling in Medicaid or enrolling in like the food and nutrition services. So I think Akalaka hopefully can be a good connector for people with assistance on applying for this and for knowledge about it. And then I think also like, I think we're connected with a lot of other great local like nonprofits. Like, for example, there's B3 Coffee, which includes many people with lived experience with and without disability. And it includes people who are like in the age group of like finishing high school and kind of in thinking about what's next. And so I think this might be a great group of people to connect to this fund, so that they, as they're kind of developing what their interests are, that they can see this as a way for them to explore like the different areas, whether that's higher education opportunities. I know there's some conferences for that. So I think that might be another resource. So there's a lot of great local like nonprofits, and I think having some bridge so that the people that are participating in their activities can be aware of this as a way to help support them building their advocacy skills. So I think Akalaka hopefully can help with this. And then if there's any of our community partners, I think to connect them to this too.
Awesome. I love your synonym for the bridge. That was awesome.
Mhm.
And I didn't anticipate it so early on, but I'm so glad they're ready to jump in. It seems as though you might have some questions from our self-advocate. Everyone for that snafu. It's okay. These things happen, and we're grateful that you stuck with us. And I'll do my best to continue right where we left off. I believe we had some questions for Victoria, and I had just asked.
Laura Newell had her hand up.
Laura and
Yeah.
Sandy both had their hands up. So whoever would like to ask the question.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I got booted off, but I'm glad we're back on. So I had used the
Rossi Fund.
Rossi Fund in the past to go to a conference. Well, my only thing is that I was grateful to have that. But if you don't have a credit card to pay for the conference and the airfare and motel and all that stuff, then they reimburse you. But if you don't have a way to pay it to begin with, then it's, it makes it kind of tricky, because some people, would probably use it more if they paid it up front. I know there was another fund I used for another conference where they actually paid up front, but through Cardinal Innovations, but I don't think that's a thing. I don't think they do that anymore. But they're now Alliance anyway. But the last time, well, I was going to go to a conference in 2020, and of course COVID happened, so I couldn't go anywhere. But I did use it back in 2018 and went to the SAVE conference in Birmingham, Alabama, and that was really good. It was a really good experience to meet people from all over the country. There were even people from other countries there, and just, I really appreciated being able to go, because
I'm glad you had a good experience. This is Chris. But you're right. The note that you made about the credit card reimbursement is typically how things are done through the state and for state matters. I just noticed Melissa had her hand up, so I wanted to. Melissa, did you have something to add to?
Yeah, just really, really quickly. And we'll talk about this more when you get to the question and answer portion of the session. I know we still have one guest presenter to talk about their experience with the Rossi Fund, but Laura, I'm glad Laura Newell brought that up about the reimbursement situation, because there are if the council, if you're approved to go somewhere and we're made aware of the challenges, the council will also work with an applicant to try and help find ways to provide some of the funding, what we call in advance. But we'll talk more about that later, because it doesn't happen very often and it's not very easy to do, but it's often worthwhile to do. So Chris, I'll talk about that a little bit later.
Sure.
You'll note that in the chat box that Pam Dempsey put some of the information in there that you've got on your resource slide at the end of the session, so that people could go right now to the Rossi Fund information on the DD Council website. So Chris, I think Sandy also had her hand up.
Sandy did.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Cynthia. We got kicked off, everybody did, but I was going to say I know Victoria and her sister very well, because, hey, Victoria, I worked with her during the summer on with Hills Up program at UNC Chapel Hill, and now I'm interning again at the Center for Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities in Carrboro, and that was done because I connected with my vocational rehab counselor, and he got the ball rolling. So I love what I do. I like the fact I'm able to work and be peers and help others without having to have a driver's license, because that is a problem. In this field, you have to have your license. And they could say, oh, you got the best resume, or you got great references, or you got so much experience. But without a license, I can't get hired. So it's very discouraging. So I really want us to get rid of that rule, please. Okay, so peer support. Yeah, so for me to be able to be a peer support for someone else, I have to have a driver's license. I mean, I have lived experience, and before my car accident, I used to be a DSP. I used to work in a group home in Carrboro with 5 ladies that had so many different disabilities. And, you know, I love doing that type of work. I'm a giver, I'm a lover. I want to help people with their goals and everything. So that's what I want to do. And this is the field I want to be in. I don't want to be a daycare teacher anymore. I did that for 16 years. Okay. Hey, Chris.
Hey, Sandy.
No, Philip. I know. Yeah, there's a lot of people on here. I do know that I met.
2024 and January 3rd.
My name is Cynthia Harris. Hey, Sarah Potter. How you doing, girl?
Sandy, I'm
Good, thank you.
That is good. How's Matt doing?
He's doing well. I'll tell him you asked. Thanks.
Sandy, I'm so glad you're so engaged, and that's part of what this is for the self-advocates.
My name is Cynthia, not Sandy.
Get your thoughts around the driver's license requirement. We'll address that shortly. I want to make sure we give our next guest time to share. So if I can, I'm going to pivot and we'll welcome Felicia Williams Brown, who also knows Victoria. And it seems like everybody knows Victoria on this call these days. Welcome. Thank you for being here. Tell us about your experience with the Rossi Fund, particularly the event or the need that it filled and where it was and what it was about.
Absolutely. So I was interested in attending the 2023 Advocacy Conference that was offered by Disability Rights. And as I was registering for that, that's where I learned about the Rossi Fund. And I applied, but I wasn't sure I would receive it because I only had like a few weeks, I think, from the deadline to register for the event. So I found out about it, by accident, honestly. But I was so grateful to be a recipient because being able to attend that conference was extremely helpful. Just to give you a little bit about me, I come from, I guess my focus would be from a caregiver. I have a 15-year-old son with autism, but then also a professional hat too. I work for the Autism Society of North Carolina, and I also have a LLC called Pioneer and Change Consulting, where I do trainings for the IDD community, things like sexuality, education, charting a life course framework, wellness, like the RAP, Wellness Recovery Action Plan. A lot of what I do gear towards the caregivers, because I too am a caregiver. And I see the need for being educated and informed so that we can also help support our self-advocates. So yeah, so that's how I got connected to the fund.
Well, how does the fund itself, it sounds like you got a lot of knowledge and skills already. How does the fund itself improve your ability to be a better advocate for yourself and others?
Absolutely. So a lot of what I do, like through the Autism Society, is support families directly online through the social media. And so there are a lot of questions that are posed there. And we have some wonderful resource specialists and a lot of knowledgeable people, but we do get those complicated questions sometimes. And being at this conference, you're able to get like the real nuts and bolts of what's going on, what's happening. A lot of questions are answered that um, everybody is not very privy to or knowledgeable about. So for me, that was very motivating to, or a motivating factor of why I attended. But then also with my son being 15, he's transitioning into young adulthood. And so I have a lot of experience with, him being a little one up until this point. But now I am exploring these uncharted territories. And so for me, I was looking to gain a lot of knowledge about how to best support him and advocate for him as he transitions to adulthood, but then to also be able to carry that information back to families so that they can be informed and empowered too. Some of the things I learned at this particular conference that I had not a lot of knowledge about prior was the segregated employment. There was a lot of discussions about that. The immediate care facilities, which is not an area that I have a lot of knowledge in. So I was able to get a lot of good feedback about that. And then I also learned some ways to better collaborate for coalition work. So it was very beneficial for me to attend. I talked about it for a long time and was able to take those notes to be able to use at my work and also personally too.
Man, that is awesome. Felicia, you answered so many of my questions all at once, and it was perfect. And you kind of already answered this one, so I'll kind of phrase it in a little bit of a different way.
Mhm.
Were you able to maintain any of those extra relationships that you planted seeds for at the conference?
Yes, absolutely. And I have to say, one pleasant surprise that I was not anticipating, because I have dealt in the world, IDD for a very long time, but I recently I became the guardian for my father who is blind. And so this was also new territory for me, but um, being able to learn about disability services for the blind was huge. And at the luminary reception, I literally sat with a person who was blind. And he was able to tell me about all the services that he utilizes, was able to give me some contacts and some names, which then put me in connection with those resources to support my father. So I still I'm still in contact with him. And then, of course, I was able to see a lot of colleagues that I work with, was able to make new connections with
Yeah,
people
I'm trying to
like
mute it. So.
Victoria. So it was really nice to be able to connect with colleagues, but also to meet with new people and also get some new ideas and feedback. Like one person had suggested some supports through the Autism Society by um, providing supports for people with autism who are in jail. And I had never thought about that. And I thought, wow, that is definitely something we need to look at. So being able to network, make those new connections, have those old connections, it was just really life-changing for me. Absolutely.
Well, Felicia, this is Chris. I would never presume to speak for you. But I am gonna assume that based on all that feedback, that it was worth it, that the process was worth it. And if my assumption is right, how would you, beyond this essay discussion series, how would you recommend it to others? I heard you mention recommending it to families, which I think is brilliant.
Absolutely. I am like a caregiver advocate, like to the heart. And so for me, what comes up really truly is the places where caregivers are. You have the special education programs, you have advisory groups, you have parent groups. The more that our caregivers are educated and informed, the better they can advocate and support our self-advocates. And then, of course, to continue to support the agencies that support our self-advocates and spreading that word. Because, like I said, I just kind of stumbled on the information about the Rossi Fund, but it would be great for it to be more available to people who would like to be more informed and educated and empowered in that way.
Well, this is Chris. If you just stumbled on it, we want to make sure that it's a bit more obvious to people. So I will, as a council, we'll come together, and I take that feedback very seriously. So I really, really appreciate that. Given some of the challenges that we've faced, first of all, I want to take a moment to thank our two guests today for sharing their experience. I really appreciate both Felicia and Victoria. Thank you both for sharing your experiences with us today.
Absolutely.
You're welcome.
Really appreciate you both. With that said, I want to just take a moment to bridge the gap and talk a little bit about Disability Voting Week. So now that we've learned about the real impact of advocacy that the Rossi Fund lends to our community and our state, what does voting have to do with the Rossi Fund? Well, there's a reason why they call it the Jean Wolff-Rossi Participant Involvement Fund. It's all about getting involved with advocacy. You learn that funds can be used to help get you to conferences and to learn about ways to support our community. And you also learn that funds can be used to help get you in front of legislators, AKA decision makers and leaders in our community, in order to best advocate for yourselves. And with a chat has appeared that from Yvonne, she shares that this is that the Rossi Fund is really complicated. So does anyone want to pivot and share a way that we can make it less complicated as a council? That's the second time I've seen it in the chat. Forgive my jumping all over the place here.
This is Melissa. One of the things that I know that folks can do is on the Rossi Fund application itself and on that website, there's an email address as well as a telephone number. And when you see the Rossi Fund marketed on any other conference that's saying, hey, call the DV Council, the staff will help you fill out a Rossi Fund application. And then they will walk beside you and help you fill out your reimbursement documentation too. If you are approved, it's just a matter of, reaching out and saying, hey, I think that you can pay for me to go to this conference, but I really need you to do most of the work to help me get there.
Amen
right?
to that. Yep.
And being willing to do that. And the staff here at the council, most of which are on this Zoom event, are willing to help anybody with filling out the forms and following up the process.
Absolutely. As the old saying goes, it takes a village. It takes a village. And we are a village. And speaking of the power of being a village, I'll go back to Disability Voting Week just briefly. It took place last week from September 11th through September 15th. And during that week, various communities of persons with disabilities across the state and across the country used their power. They hosted voting educational events. They utilized social media to encourage other persons with disabilities to vote. They reached out to legislators to get proclamations issued and more. And people organized town halls and partnered with disability rights organizations from North Carolina to NYC, that's New York City, and everywhere in between, showing leaders across the country that our voice matters. So speaking of using our power, check out this powerful statistic. If persons with disabilities voted at the same rate as persons without disabilities, given the same demographics, it would lead to 2 million more votes. Now that is the power of decision making, ladies and gentlemen, and deciding to make your voice heard. There is a path forward. Here is a path forward. It may be more challenging for us to have our voices heard, but we have climbed mountains before and we will continue to do so. And the good news is that there are resources to get the word out there. And we don't have as much time as I would like, but now is the time that we want to hear from you, the participants. The good news is we've already heard some of those participants share, but at this time, I would love it if you had the courage to do so. You don't have to, but if you would like to come on camera, if you haven't been on camera yet, we would love to see your face. This is a time for encouragement and community and coming together. And I've got some questions for you, but the first one is if anyone would like to share why they feel voting matters. Why is voting important to you? And you're welcome to answer that by putting your hand up in the chat or simply unmuting and sharing. And if you put your hand up, we will call on you either electronically or physically. And the first question is, why is voting important to you? And if you don't want to answer that question, the other two questions pertain to the Rossi Fund. One is, what's one important thing you learned about the Rossi Fund that you didn't know before our discussion today? And the next question is, how might you use the Rossi Fund to become a stronger self-advocate?
I'd like to answer.
Oh.
Are we muted? Okay. Hi, my name is Cynthia Harris again, and I want to answer 1 and 3.
Go for it.
1, why is voting important? It is important because that's how laws and policies and things get passed. And if you don't share your voice or your concerns, how can you complain after something occurs? And then, like, I had somebody try to tell me I couldn't vote because I was disabled. And I'm like, what? That's not true. So I was like, okay, anyway. But yeah, so number 3, how might you use the Rossi Fund to become a stronger self-advocate? Well, I would use the Rossi Fund to help me travel to different conferences or pay for lodging or transportation. Because like I'm going to the IBICA conference and I was told about the Rossi Fund after I had already paid for myself. So I gotta see, I don't know, it may be too late to try to apply for the Rossi Fund. But I'm going to the IBICA conference in Virginia Beach on October the 5th through the 6th. So the IBICA conference is a traumatic brain injury conference that brings all the clubhouses together, and we talk about different topics and help each other out, see what things that are maybe beneficial or working for their clubhouse. So just a big networking event, and it'll be my first time going, and I'm excited and I really want to go. So yeah. All right, I'm done talking now.
No, that's awesome. That's advocacy in action. Does anybody else want to answer any of the 3 questions?
Go ahead, Laura.
Thank you.
No,
Go ahead,
Can you-
Laura, whenever you're ready. Yep,
oh, can you hear me?
sure can.
Okay, so, yeah, I always tell people that if you don't vote, you can't complain about who gets elected. And I also tell them, even if the person you vote for doesn't get elected, just keep on and, don't let it discourage you from voting the next time around.
Amen to that.
And you can still advocate for change no matter who is in office. And I would use a Rossi Fund to go to conferences and meet with other self-advocates and learn about other services that's offered to people with disabilities. So
Thank you. Thanks so much for that, Laura. You're absolutely right. Mary Ann, you got your hand up?
Yes, thank you. Oops, I don't know if you can see me. Okay, yeah, you can. Good. So I have 2 adult children that have learning challenges and mental health. And this is a way, I guess, number one, what you put up there, this question, I would like to help them have a voice. The opportunity for them to have a voice during the day is difficult because they're either in their day program or out with their direct support staff. So I think voting is very vital. And if I could just in any way, shape, or form give my children a chance to have a voice, that's what I want to do. And I just am learning about ROTC. So I'm just reading about it while we're talking and learning about it for the first time. So I appreciate this day and having the opportunity to share that with you all, that I want to give my children and they're adults, but I help them understand how to have a voice and advocate for themselves.
Right. We really appreciate those thoughts and that input, Mary Ann. So true. Well, I want to have more time for your voices, but I do also want to have time to go over the resources. And I also just want to mention that any statistics that I mentioned that are not present in the resources slides, I will add to the resources email that I will send you all within a week of this event to make sure that you all have accurate information. The first resources page is all for the Rossi Fund, the Rossi Fund information link, and then of course a link to the actual application. And then on the next resources slide, you'll find some voting resources, including a voting resource checklist and information on Disability Voting Week, so that if you want to get involved next year, you can. As well as some really, really cool social media graphics, which is where I got the 2 million votes statistic, which is just so powerful. And I do want to make note a general appreciation for everyone here today who hung on through our technology snafus. We appreciate you so much. You jumped back online so quickly. Thank you so much to the interpreters. Thank you to the Spanish interpreters. Thank you to the ASL interpreters. Thank you so much to the captioner. Thank you to all the awesome people behind the scenes who make this magic work each and every month. Just a couple events coming up. We always have our Lunch and Learns, our regular event, and you can click on that link there to register to whichever one speaks to you. There's a link to SARTAC, and then there's a Hope Inclusive Housing Summit, November 13th. And that focus is, of course, for housing and community living for persons with different disabilities. And our next self-advocate discussion series is October 18th, celebrating National Disability Employment Awareness Month. And of course, thank you so much to our speakers that jumped on this topic today, Felicia and Victoria. We appreciate you so very much. Thank you all for joining us today.